get started, and I'm going to call us to order at the BUHS number 6 meeting at 6:33 on Monday, February 5th. And the first thing we have on our agenda is to have a budget discussion, so I will turn that over first to Bob, and I'm sure Frank will chime in as we need him.
Okay, thank you, Ricky. This is one time when we sit here, we haven't had a change since the last meeting, and I will just briefly recap. We have made quite a few changes from the initial pass back in December, but now we are published, so to speak. The annual meeting book is going to press. And the numbers that we end up with now will be the ones that are presented to the public at the annual meeting. And so just as a reminder, going back to the beginning of the budget season, we asked the administrators, as we do every year, basically to provide us with a budget that was level service, basically, provides what we need for the kids, but level service, and as close as possible to level funding. As the way it always works is we spend a lot of time on the expense end of things, which is our responsibility, and we wait until the state finally comes out with the famous equalized pupil numbers, which is frequently at the 11th and a half hour. And that happened to us this year once again, and this year there was an additional curveball in that the number was way below what we anticipated it would be. And equalized students are based on socioeconomic status and special ed and so forth. So one student is not equal to one student entirely. It's a complicated measurement, but nonetheless, so we had to go back, take another look at our budget. We had presented a budget that was basically a even spending budget, but when you apply it to about 200 fewer equalized students, you're back in trouble as it relates to the tax rate, and Frank will address that. But expense-wise, which was our charge, we went back to the well and took a look again in early January and made some changes. And as a result, our budget that we are presenting to the public at the annual meeting is down actually 3% from last year at $24,591,000. And that was achieved by carefully going through basically line by line the administrators and finding ways to do things a little more efficiently. There were, in terms of additions, there was in payroll a little bit. However, in many other areas we were able, including payroll, we were able to reutilize our resources and save a little money from a lot of places. And if you have specific questions, I know the administrators have their particular numbers in mind, that they made some changes to come down to a 3% decrease. Breaking it up a little bit by category, the district-wide budget, which includes operations for all three, the physical plant, library services, all those services that serve all three units, was basically the same as last year at up 0.5%. The senior high down 1.8%, and tuition to Wyndham Regional Career Center from the senior high down. So the total comes out to 6% decrease in the senior high. And BAMS, after some further revisions, came out with almost a 7% decrease in expenses this coming year over last year. Career Center, 2.3% down. And if you add it all up and apply it to the full total, it's a 3% decrease, or a $768,000 reduction from last year. And this was brought about in order to enable us to keep the tax increase at a a reasonable level, I guess you'd call it, or at the level we were at before we made some of the changes and the equalized pupils were made known to us. And from that point, that was the expense number. And Frank, if you would just go through how that applies and works its way down to the actual tax rate.
Sure.
And we'll have, and we'll go right from there to questions, if that's okay with everyone, questions and comments and whatever, for the public.
Sounds good. Related to the tax rate, I've handed out a single sheet with some graphs and some data on the other side. As it relates to the tax rate, this is trend data. I've given you the same information last year at this time, but updated this with our most recent proposal. And the bottom set of statistics on the graph show the tax rate impact. So even though, as Bob has said, the budget expenditure graph shows a significant decline, that's the $768,000 reduction. Even with that, our tax rate remains pretty level. It doesn't have that similar decline. So another way to say it is, if we didn't make these adjustments, the tax rate would have been up substantially. The reason for that, to sort of explain how that works, is the Agency of Ed takes the spending and essentially compares it to the student population, and calculates a cost per student. And then once we have a cost per student, they compare that number to a statewide statistic. So if spending doesn't mirror the change in student enrollment, then the tax rate rises proportionately. So as Bob has mentioned, student enrollment was down 17%. Now, our tax rate with no adjustment would have been in that category. Obviously, that's an unacceptable impact to our voters. Or another way to say it, because our spending didn't drop 17%, along with our student enrollment, we would have had that, we were facing that dramatic increase. So we came back into the budget process, as Bob said, quite late, based on when the data was released to us. The most recent data was actually January 4th, which was the day that we had our budget meeting. And we've done a couple of revisions since then, but with the adjustments that we've made to both spending and revenue, we were able to get back down to $17,443 spending per student. That compares to $17,350 where we are today. So it's still an increase. That's why the tax rate is still up a little bit, but it's essentially a stable rate that our citizens have been accustomed to seeing in the last couple of years. So that's the kind of the summary explanation for that. A couple of other statistics that you see on the data sheet that I've provided you. So the first graph shows total enrollment. It doesn't show equalized students. So total enrollment is the number of students that are in the building, 7 through 12. You see that number is fairly stable. But equalized students, which is the data that's used for the tax rate, went from 1,156 students under the current year down to 960 students. So that's the 17% drop. The adjustments that we made for that. The single largest adjustment was reflecting an additional $2 million in revenue from the Vernon students that explain most of the reduction here. So that substantially offset that 17% impact that would have affected taxes. That additional $2 million substantially offset that. But then there was the other enrollment loss. In addition to the Vernon adjustment, we didn't have a revenue offset, and that's why we had to go and look at expenditures. Student-teacher ratios, you see the next data set there is very stable. Talked about the budget expenditures being down. The reverse side of this data sheet is actually the same document that I provided last year. The Agency of Ed has not updated the data, but so this is actually the same sheet if you had your folder from last year. But it's still useful to see where Brattleboro Union High School sort of fits on a statistical comparison for other union high schools in the state. Put Brattleboro Union in bold. With the adjustment of accounting for the debt that we have, $2.4 million, you see that we're right in the middle, 15,185. I've sorted the data by that column, by adjusted spending for per pupil for long-term debt. It's the column in bold, it's column number 7. However, if we didn't account for debt, or if another way to say it, if we just looked at this data the way the state calculates tax rates, and you just looked at this tax rate data, you would see that our number is the 3rd highest in the state, and that's our reality. The state doesn't say we're going to give you a pass because you have 2.4 million. They're saying somebody's got to pay for that, and it's our taxpayers that will pay for that. So I provide this information to help us understand that the commitments that we made in 2003, 4, 5, as a community around the substantial improvement. We have the benefit of that, and it's going to serve us for a long period of time to come, and I'm sure it has a reason why we have attracted so many more kids from Dover and other communities that have a choice. It's the result is a high tax rate. So I just mentioned this in the context of what we just went through with a difficult choices around spending. We are right behind Virgins and Middlebury in terms of the 3 highest tax rates in the state, and this is 2017 fiscal year. As soon as I get the fiscal year 18 data, I'll give you an update.
Right. On the long-term debt, why do they use the aggregate? I mean, is that how much we owe?
No, that's the check we cut every year.
That's an annual. Okay.
Yeah.
I understand that now.
Yeah, and it will go down a little bit every year because the interest goes down, but it's 2024, fiscal year 24, that we'll see that go to whatever we need to borrow to sustain a 20-year-old facility at that point.
Good. I'm just looking at that last column, the proportion of students eligible for free and reduced lunch, and it's a relatively low number looking at other ones. How do they come up with that number? Because I've never had that impression.
Yeah, so for high schools and for all schools, that number is based on the number of families that participate in the income review for eligibility of a family to qualify for either a free or a reduced child nutrition program service. So, it varies a lot in high schools. Our average poverty rating in Wyndham Southeast for the feeder elementary schools is closer to 50% poverty, and well, certainly above that in Brattleboro Town, a little below that in the average of Putney and Dummerston and Guilford and Vernon. So you would think it would be closer to 46, 47, 48%, but the difference is it reflects that it's not at all unusual, whereas kids get older, they're oftentimes less apt to participate in the food service program.
That I get, but I just wonder why it's just kids in Wyndham Southeast that are high school and middle school kids that are less likely to sign up for it as opposed to the other ones that are so big, unless everybody sees that drop.
Everybody sees that. It's not at all unique to Brattleboro Union.
But looking at K through 6, are we below average? I mean, we have less poverty than other places in Vermont?
K through 6, particularly in Brattleboro Town, we have a much higher poverty, but for Dummerston, to some extent Vernon, there's lower poverty.
Right, no, but you were saying it was around 50%, and I thought that was fairly high statewide.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, it strikes me that the drop between K through 6 and then the middle school, high school is more precipitous for us than that. And I don't know if that goes into the equalized pupil computation as well. It doesn't, okay.
No, equalized pupil is driven by poverty, but they don't use free and reduced lunch. They use the data that the state maintains around which families are accessing the various family support programs.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Sean?
Yeah, I was just wondering, could you clarify for me the student-teacher ratio graph?
Yeah.
The call is for 1 to 5, I believe, right? And that,
Yeah, so that's the student to all staff ratio.
yes,
And this is students who are certified staff. So when I say certified staff, that would be all of our professionals who are eligible for the teacher retirement benefit, which also means that they have an endorsement, a certification from the state standards board to provide student support and or instruction. So yeah, that's a very different subset. And I do have that data for Brattleboro Union High School. We are about 5.9 students per employee.
which is above their recommendation, right?
Yeah, they haven't broken it out by high school and elementary.
Oh, all right.
You would expect high schools to be significantly higher, regional high schools especially, than an elementary like Guilford School. Just because of a regional program would be expected to have a much greater scale. But you're right, yeah, the state is saying the average is 4.5 when you take all high schools and elementary schools, 4.5 students per staff, and we are at 5.9, so we're, unlike Guilford, which is right around the state average, Guilford Elementary. Yeah.
Other questions? Franz? Hi. If you're not a board member, if you just mind identifying yourself with the camera, that would be great.
I will do that. Franz Reichsman from the Brattleboro Representative Town Meeting Finance Committee. Our committee has been trying to put together our final report on the high school budget for FY19. And we do this even though the representative town meeting does not vote on the budget. The town charter tells us we're supposed to do this, so we do. So I've been working along on this for some number of months now, and still can't say that I really understand everything. So I do have a few questions that I'd like to pose to the board and the administration about, some of this may be a little excessively picky, I don't know. That's part of my learning process here. So I'll be as organized as I can about it. I did have a chance to meet with Frank for a little bit this afternoon, and he straightened me out significantly, as is usually the case. So I'll be as brief as I can and try to stick to things that I think are of some real importance. So one thing that I haven't, well, this is of some interest, I think. What's the net financial effect of Vernon's withdrawal on the FY19 budget? I know it's supposed to come out as close to being a neutral effect in that the amount for tuition has gone up, and hopefully that's by about the same amount as state funding has gone down as a result of the equalized pupils, et cetera. But I wonder if there's any way to actually calculate at this point how does it look like that's going to turn out?
Yeah, in general, the answer is that the net effect is marginal, but the specific answer is that we don't receive the differentiation by student between the equalized students that were in the 2018 data set to compare to 2019. And without that specific data, both of the 5 towns for fiscal year 18 right now, which was the basis for the 1,156 equalized students, so both how many Vernon kids, how many Guilford, we don't have that specifically, but also the other issue is the adjustment as a result of Act 46 and Act 49 on the what they call the hold harmless adjustment. It's the phantom kid. So we can make a pretty good guess, which is we know that we have in our budget for that $2 million in revenue an assumption of about 130 kids from Vernon, because we know who's here and we know who we're going to likely see next year. Seniors leave, 6th graders come in, times 15,500 is our tuition rate. So from that point of view, knowing that the state does not allow public schools to make a profit, when we set our tuition rate, we take our total spending and we subtract transportation and food service and special education, any kind of grants like Title I. We have a cost per student, and that's about 15,500, as you also see in this data. So from that point of view, I think we can be pretty reasonably assured that it's marginal, because if we're getting a $2 million revenue, but we're not able to count 133 kids, we can see the math says that that's an equivalent $15,500 wash. Or another way to say it, the way you set taxes is you take your total spending, subtract revenue, like tuition, you get a net spending, divide that by your own kids, not the Vernon kids, not the Dover kids, not the Marlboro kids, but your own 960 kids, and that's how we set our tax rate for our member districts. So I think if we had all of the details, we wouldn't find it substantially different than a marginal impact.
So you would multiply 15,500 times 133, and that would be the offset for the $2 million, and mathematics would tell us that that's very close.
Yes.
Okay.
And when you look at the annual report, and by the way, I didn't mention the annual report is out and it's on the website, and you will see the booklets out and about. Do we have any in the building here that we might be able to pass out? I know we can.
I can go to Liam's front office.
Oh, that would be great before the end of the meeting. It'd be nice to give the board a document. But my point is, you'll see in the revenue statement, and you probably have that, the tuition assumption is up $2,065,000 or $2,085,000. That's the new Vernon kids.
And so the total number of tuitioned students is the 1,110 minus 960 who are actual district kids, is that correct? So that would be 150
Yeah.
tuition students? Okay.
Approximately. The other thing that what your math doesn't account for is school choice kids. So those are kids like that are reside in a community that has a designated high school, like let's say Newfane, who is designated for Leland and Gray, but they apply for a school choice provision that if the administration approves, there is no billing for that. They attend here, but there's no money changes. So there's quite a few of those kids. I don't know if you know, Mary. I think it's like 25. I don't know. I could look that up.
So if they're not in the district and no money changes hands, that sounds like giving it away.
That's right. That's part of the state law and the idea of free and appropriate public education for all. Yes, it does seem to undermine the funding formula, though.
Well, I'll sit up a little straighter, I guess. Okay, thank you. There's a lot of discussion about the PEAK program and the STEP program, and it was considered that the changes that were being proposed would not be enacted right away, but also the new positions are funded. So I'm wondering how that fits together in terms of what the program is going to look like for the coming year. And I waited until Keith was gone, of course.
Yeah.
to
I was
ask.
just unfortunate that Keith said that.
Yeah, well, I can come back to this.
I can also say too that just prior to this meeting, the reason why some of us were late getting here is because we were at a BAMS committee meeting
Yeah.
having a discussion related to this, related to what's been what people are talking about, what and sort of where things are going. And anybody that was at the BAMS committee meeting, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I can say that nothing is set in stone as of yet. That they're working through a process of figuring out what's going to do the best for the kids in whether it's alternative education, whether it's behavioral, whatever, and doing the best that we can. But there is technically in the budget a pot of money to address the needs of kids that don't fit in traditional educational systems.
So the amount of funding is known, it's just...
How it's actually going to be allocated to be spent is still being worked on.
Okay.
And Keith could probably clarify that more for you when he gets back. But
Okay. Now, a big question I think other people may end up having, as well as me, is that when the first draft, or at least the first draft that I saw of the budget came out in November, the bottom line for spending was 25 million, some number of dollars, which I'm sure we all have here somewhere. And then as a result of the funding formula stuff that was cut, and the final number is the $24,591,000, with a difference of something like $784,000, I think, going from November to now. And so I went back and I tried to figure out, okay, where did that $784,000 come from? And I couldn't quite piece it together. There was a Finance Committee meeting in early January where a bunch of cuts were proposed, and they amounted to $351,000, but that included the diversity coordinator position, which was then pulled out. So it seemed to me that there were something like $263,000 worth of cuts included in that decision-making that went from November to now. So that still leaves about $500,000 in spending cuts that I don't know where they happened. Now, I sort of suspect some of it's in the Career Center funding, which also decreased a lot at some point. So I was just wondering if people could tie that together for me.
Most of it is in the high school budget, and you're right, it's related to the Career Center. So in the high school budget, the high school has to pay the Career Center for the 92 kids that are projected to be enrolled in the Career Center. And yes, that was a $409,000 reduction, partially or actually directly related to the lower number of students. The AOE data was 145, dropping down to 100 and, let's see if I can find that data. It's like 100 and, actually showed it to you this afternoon. I don't know if you remember, but I do have that pretty handy. Yeah, here it is. 145 down to 130 students. So that precipitated that $410,000 reduction that the high school writes a check to the Career Center for. So that does explain most of it. And then you are right that there were also 2 additional changes to the Career Center staffing proposal that makes up the difference.
But the bulk of that $500,000 is an adjustment in spending that we spent to ourselves. So it looks like a spending decrease, but it's really more of a bookkeeping change.
You could say that, although from the state's point of view, it does reflect a lower amount of, a financial commitment to Career Center.
Yeah.
But it's based on a lower number of students attending.
Did that have an impact on functioning of the Career Center? Did that make a difference?
Well, it led to, we had to reduce some full-time FTE positions for next year.
2 of them.
2 of them, yeah, to 0.5. And a reduction of horticulture as well.
And the reason why is that's all integral to where we started the conversation with on the tax rate. The spending that occurs at the Career Center and the cost per student at the Career Center is directly integrated and an impact on there's only one tax rate. There's not a Career Center tax rate and a BAMS tax rate and a high school tax rate. It's just one tax rate. So yes, it has a bearing.
Frank, maybe could you also comment a little bit on our change in the use of reserve funds we made?
Sure. Yeah. So we have been targeting approximately a 10% reserve in our general fund, and we actually, because of surplus in the last fiscal year, we actually increased the fund balance a little beyond that 10% target. So we proposed an increase in use of fund balance. The current budget was $260,000 in our general operating fund, and the proposed is use of $915,000 in fund balance. So it's a significant increase in use of fund balance, but it's not like an unprecedented number. Fiscal year 17 budget was $700,000, and as I recall, the year before that it was a higher number. And after using those projected fund balances, we are still at $2,305,000 projected, which is a little under 10%.
So if I could take off on that and just make a comment, this really isn't a question, but it's kind of where our committee has ended up, which is that, the drop in equalized students is a one-time event. There's no reason to think there's going to be a similar drop. Presumably, we've disposed of all our phantom students. But the lower number of equalized students is going to stay, and that means that next year's budget is going to be under some degree of pressure, and you can't go on funding your budget with fund balance forever. So that's like one of our main findings, is that the lower number of equalized students is with us for good, and that presumably means that spending at the lower level is going to have to be with us, and that level of funding is going to have to be achieved without fund balance at some point in the future.
Other questions? I saw our hand over here at some point. Sean?
Well, I just had one question, and the cost of equalized student was at $17,349. And I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway. The tuition is $15,500. Is that because of other revenue?
It's both revenue, but also that we cannot include special ed, the cost of special ed in the tuition. We can't include cost of transportation or food service, but also, as you say, the revenues.
Because there is a revenue stream that makes up that, whatever it is, $2,000 difference.
Yeah, that's right.
And in this book, could you tell me where the fund balance contribution is shown?
I can. It'll be on the summary document that precedes the budget, so that's on page 14.
In the big book?
I got 8 of the full,
Oh, I see.
and then I got 15 of the summary.
Of the summary.
More summary, but they didn't make it over this way.
Okay, so it's 14 in the gray book.
Yeah, okay.
In the full book, in the summary, let me tell you what section there. Yeah, I think we may have it in the summary. Yes, the summary. We have that on page 8. Page 8 is the way in which we utilize fund balance.
So in the white book, it's on page 8. Ruth, did you have a question?
Excuse me, yes. It was indicated that we have 25 students here from other schools for school choice.
Maybe Keith knows how many that the administration has approved. I'm sure Steve would know. Right?
Okay.
But
My question is,
Oh, it is.
are there any students from here going out to other schools? Or is this just a one-way street?
my understanding is that I do have the incoming. It is 21 students incoming that we've approved. Yeah, as to whether our students have applied to Leland, Gray, Bellows Falls, or that there is a consortium of high schools that are in a in a group. And my understanding is very, very limited. It's pretty lopsided. We receive far more than we send.
So this is kind of a losing proposition for us.
Well, on the other hand, we know that additional 1 or 2 students per class or per grade level, as long as we're under 20 students in a classroom, it's not going to be more heat, it's not going to be more lights, it's probably not going to hire anyone. So it's not a direct cash loss, but certainly they're taking time for faculty and so on.
So presumably, their sending school, or the school that they would ordinarily attend, must get money for these students.
They do, they count them. And it's not that they get cash, it's just they count them just as we count our kids, and it goes into their tax rate calculation. It helps lower their tax rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's, it is limited to, I believe, 5% of a population. So this is not something that has an...
I know it's not something new, but I just was wondering, I was surprised that we had so many coming in, and I wondered if we had any going the other way.
I don't believe we
Why
do.
would they want to?
Well, historically, Ruth, I think, historically from what I remember from past years of having this similar conversation, the only kids that left here to go someplace else were to go because they wanted to do the Asian Studies program at Leland and Gray. So that was really the only kids that left here to go anywhere, as they went to go there specifically because they wanted to be part of that program. That's what I seem to remember historically. But
Does the Compass School fit in there somewhere?
No.
no, that's it's considered a private school.
Doesn't the board set the number for the number?
Yeah, a number of years ago, we set the maximum number,
Yeah.
so where's that 21, I think is right at that maximum.
Ricky, this is BCTV camera operator Ian Keel. Could I ask Frank a question regarding what you were just speaking about? What would, if those 20, let's say it was 20 students, you said it was 21, if those students paid tuition, what amount of revenue would they bring into?
It's that times 15,500, so that's a pretty good number. I can hit a quick.
About 340.
There you go. Yeah. So that's, it's a significant amount of financial resource that would have quite an impact.
But under the state, it's a state statute, these students of school choice aren't required to pay tuition. Or they're sending towns, rather.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and the money that, we can't count them the same way that we count a kid that lives in Brattleboro or one of the regular towns.
That's right.
Thank you.
For tax rate.
Did you say the enrollment was down at the RCC?
Yes.
How many was that?
Well, the state provides us with a 6-semester average, and the average has dropped from 145 down to 130. We do have that data sheet in the full document here. And we know that that's going to probably drop again based on the way in which we've just aligned the curriculum with the state standard of a 120-minute course instead of a 80-minute course. It's on page 24 of the main book here.
But those 25 result in a $400,000 saving? Am I right?
Yes, but it also resulted in a loss of revenue. So it has both an impact.
15 times 15 is roughly what, 230 or something like that. 21% and I can't I don't know how to, because we lost staff as well.
We did. And because we did change the spending, we changed the tuition rate, so it affects the tuition rate, it affects the revenue, and it affects, there's also a, what's called an on-behalf payment by the state that we have to book, which is, it's another $8,000, it's on page 24, $8,567 per student that we have to record both as a revenue and an expense in our books. There are a lot of variables for that way they integrate the Career Center into a host high school.
Yeah, I think 15 students, 400,000. I can't make it work, but.
Ian?
Just thought of a question. Why don't our tuition rate and our spending per pupil rate match?
So that was the question Sean was asking, and it is a tough one to follow. The main reason is because our cost per equalized student is all costs, including transportation and special ed and all costs. The state says that when we set a tuition rate, you will not include special ed, and you will not include transportation, and you will also reduce your rate so that you're not billing Dover or Marlboro for something like the $100,000 that we get from the Title I revenue. So there's no opportunity for a profit, is basically.
That answers the question.
All right. Yeah.
In the interest of transparency, I just want to clarify the peak situation and make sure that everyone understands, in part because, I'm Flo Levin, by the way, sorry. In part because 2 different articles in 2 different papers, one was in the Brattleboro Reformer, January 12th, and one was in the Commons on January 24th. Both have information that I don't believe is correct, and I just want to make sure that the public understands and we're clear about what is accurate. So in the Reformer, it says the peak program, which remains funded with 3 more positions being added via the budget and another one through federal grant money. I want to clarify that that is inaccurate and is not my understanding at all of what's happening with the budget, and we'll come back to that. And then the other one in the Commons is the interview with Ricky, in which he says, so on top of the 2 peak positions, we have 4 new positions in the middle school to help kids who are struggling to access their education in the traditional way. So I really want to clarify, because both of these would lead one to believe that in fact the peak program is expanding. And my understanding is that while there is a pot of money that has been moved from the BAMS budget to the BU6 budget, that money is primarily going to what will be a behavior program, which is a way of helping students who have behavior issues with supports, and that's very different from an alternative program that's experiential. So Keith, is it accurate to say that the 2 positions that are in that budget are BCBA and someone else along those lines, which is a behavior analyst position, not a teaching position? Is that accurate?
One of them would be slated for a BCBA, if we're able to find one. The other one is slated to be a teaching position, and as we discussed earlier this evening, there's a possibility that it has you know, that role could involve kind of what we've traditionally had as peak, some component of that.
So just to clarify a little bit, I just want to make sure everyone understands that the population that peak serves are not students who are necessarily don't necessarily have behavior issues. They have issues with not accessing classroom education. They're not engaged, they're not coming to school, they are struggling, they're failing their classes. They're not necessarily the students who are acting out. And so that's a different population. There's definitely overlap. I mean, there's absolutely no question that there's overlap, and plenty of students act out because they can't access what's going on in the classroom. However, the level of need and trauma and nurturing that our students need is pretty substantial. And what peak does is quite different than the behavior approach that is my understanding of the direction that what that money is primarily going to be used for. So I just want to make sure that that was clear, because both of these articles seemed not exactly accurate.
Any other questions related to the budget? Yes.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that. At the last meeting, I felt like the community and the board was promised that if there were to be changes to the peak program, that would happen through a process that was transparent and involved staff, community, families, and students. And so far, that has not happened. The budget's set to be voted upon tomorrow night, which, if there is a significant change to the program, which it absolutely looks like there will be, there's no recourse. It's just going to happen.
Let me just clarify a couple things, because as I said earlier, we did have a BAMS committee meeting where we did have this discussion and talked about some of the going forward steps related to peak and whatever else. The budget, first of all, gets voted on a week from tomorrow night. It's not tomorrow night, it's a week from tomorrow night, is the annual meeting, for starters. So, one thing. The other thing is that the way the budget, and it's statutorily, and Frank, help me if I get this wrong, but it's statutorily and everything else, that what will be voted on is the pot of money, and how that pot of money is spent is put out there as a, this is what we're thinking how we're gonna spend it, but that could change at any point in time. You know, if for whatever reason, and I'll just pick a department in the high school, say, for whatever reason, nobody registers to take French next year, but everybody wants to take Spanish next year, it might mean that we have to lose a French teacher and hire another Spanish teacher because we just don't have that. And that's just based on what is there. So what's gonna get voted on is, here's the pot of money, and now it's up to the administration, and with board input and public input and whatever else, to make some decisions about how that money is spent. So if, for instance, we've had situations in the past where people have wanted to cut big chunks of money out of the budget, or add a whole big chunk of money back into our budget at our annual meeting. People can go ahead and say to do that, and they might have the idea that they want to do that for a particular thing, to add a particular program or whatever else, but it doesn't mean that that money goes to that program. It just means that that pot of money is now approved as the new budget, and that's what happens. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's really
Okay.
helpful.
So even though, and I think that, and I just want to say too, in the article where I was quoted from the radio interview, is my understanding is that in the budget, there are 6 positions, the 2 peak and the 4 added, that's 6 positions that are currently the 2 peak and the 4 that are being added to help kids access their education in a different way. The kids that have a hard time accessing their education in a traditional way. And how those 6 positions get shuffled is what's being discussed. It will continue to be discussed throughout the course of the spring to figure that out.
Can I follow up?
Yes.
Thank you, that is helpful. It seems though that decisions are being made without a transparent process. And I'm just wondering if maybe, Keith, you want to propose some kind of guideline for some kind of timeline for some sort of open process, because parents of current and former students, they find out just from casual conversation with us that the program's in our understanding being cut, if not modified substantially to the point where it won't exist the way they know it. And they're shocked and they're dismayed, and so are we on behalf of the kids, because obviously we really believe in what we do. So I'd just like there to be some true transparency and clarity. I don't feel like that's happened.
I don't know how to respond, Jacob. You use this term transparency, and I don't really know what you mean by it. You want certain things from me, but I don't know if this is the right setting. I've been very transparent with you. What I would say is that some of the disconnect is people want to discuss the merits, the position itself, and deciding which positions stay and which ones go are an administrative decision. So I'm not opening that up for discussion with teachers and pinning teachers against teachers and the merits of their positions. I'm not making that a transparent process. In the budgeting process, when I have to decide whether I'm going to cut French or math or science, I'm not involving teachers in that discussion. And you see, I felt like you want teacher input on that. I'm not doing that. It's people's jobs, and I'm not pinning teachers up against each other. I will tell you, and I've been very transparent with this, that moving forward, I will involve teachers in some type of process in figuring out what these Tier 3 supports are for our students who struggle. And I'm happy to involve teachers in that discussion, but I'm not pulling teachers together on the Christmas break when I have to make financial decisions about who stays and who doesn't. It's just not happening that way. I'm sorry to be that frank. I've tried to have that conversation, but yes, there's continued conversation that has to happen with staff around some of these changes. Absolutely.
Okay, and just so I'm clear, I'm not talking about my position, Flo's position, I'm talking about the program. And I understood that the board was being told and that the community was being told there would be some form of open process. And I feel like there's been a decision that the school is moving towards a step model and staff doesn't really understand what that is.
I didn't say there'd be an open process. I didn't
No?
say that.
That's what I understood.
I said I would involve staff as we design it for what it's gonna look like at BAMS next year. I don't recall saying there'd be an open process with the community and stuff on that particular topic.
Okay.
Maybe I'm misspeaking, but, sorry.
All right, I want to focus us back to the budget, because that's what we're supposed to be doing right now. Is there any other questions related to the budget? And any other questions, concerns related to the budget? So, and just to clarify too, so next Tuesday night, February 13th, 7 o'clock in the high school gym is where the annual meeting will be. So I know all of us will be there. And hopefully the community will be there as well to vote on that budget so that we can move forward with the process. So next Tuesday at 7. So that's it for the budget discussion. So we'll transition to the regular board meeting at this point. Do we need a break to do that? No? Okay. All right, we're gonna move on. And the first thing on our agenda, as always, is the approval of the minutes of the last meeting. And we actually have 3 meetings worth of minutes to approve. So we have January 8th, January 10th, and January 17th. So,
I move approval of those minutes.
okay. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Are there any additions, deletions, corrections to any of those minutes, the 8th, the 10th, or the 17th?
Just for clarification, the minutes of the 10th have been
They were distributed electronically
Today.
today.
today, okay.
Yeah.
So I probably haven't.
So maybe not everybody's seen them, and that was that special Wednesday meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ricky, just a question. If I wasn't at the short meeting on the 17th, so, but I'm still allowed to
Yeah,
vote.
all board members can vote on the approval of the minutes. Even if you weren't there, you can still approve the minutes. It's, that's fine.
The abstention is just a tradition.
The abstention from the minutes is, from approving is just that, a tradition.
And just for my clarification, the minutes of the 10th probably would reflect basically the same discussion as the 8th and the same topics covered, which was the budget.
Yeah, it was a budget, considered a budget work session. Okay. Any, right, we ready to vote? All in favor of approving the minutes for January 8th, 10th, and 17th?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? None. Okay, moving on. We have some visitors that haven't spoken, and we usually do recognition of groups of visitors. Is there anybody that wants to speak on something else that's not related to the budget that's here tonight? Okay.
Ricky?
Yeah.
You skipped communications.
Oh, sorry, I apologize. Are there any communications that have come before to the board for anybody? Yeah, Sean.
Well, I don't know if this is the proper moment to do it, but I received a letter on Saturday from Team Tenny. And they were from Team Tenny,
Okay, yeah.
and it had to do with the Finance Committee. I think everybody on the Finance Committee probably got the letter. They were looking for minutes from the Finance Subcommittee for, I believe it was two meetings that we had.
It was 2, and one has been posted, and I believe that the one that was not out there is being taken care of.
Yeah, I've just seen it now, yeah.
It's, according to statute, it's within 5 days of the meeting, the minutes are supposed to be posted, so.
Right.
We
And
will.
a further discussion, maybe not tonight, would be like the TCC, the Planning Policy, and the BAMS Committee. We don't post the minutes from those meetings because all that information is always brought to the full board, actually, as is the Finance Subcommittee also. So there must be a fine line of what is required in terms of minutes from subcommittee meetings that hasn't been clarified. So I wrote Barb an email today, and I think she's gonna look into it. And I mentioned it to Lyle also, so. It'd be interesting to clarify that, because we don't want people looking for minutes that don't need to be read, so.
Or may, in some cases, may not really exist, because,
Yeah.
as you just pointed out,
There's never
historically, the
been,
committee
there've never been
meetings
meetings
just
for
report
the-
out during consent
that is for
agenda.
the BAM or the Planning Policy, the TCC subcommittee, so, which I think is perfectly fine, but I think it should be out there, the process, you know.
Ricky, are the minutes from these meetings posted somewhere? I haven't been able to find them. I know I can watch it on Fact TV.
On the WSESU website.
Okay.
You go to the high school, BUHS number 6, and then the minutes of all the meetings.
Okay.
And I just, we're big on promoting ourselves at BCTV, so Fact TV's up in Bells Falls.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's all right.
Okay.
Wrong
Sorry.
district.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
That's all right. So yeah, so the minutes go, and on the WSESU website.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Any other communications?
I have a question.
Yes.
I have to get something approved, should that wait until my
Yeah.
thing?
We'll do that during,
Okay,
as part of your
Kathy's-
report, we can do it then, or we can do it under new business later. Yeah. Okay. Communications are good. Moving on to consent agenda. Is there a motion to enter consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved, seconded, okay, we're good. All right, let's start with finance, building, and transportation.
All right, we met on December 1st, and at the January board meeting that we had, it was quite a lengthy meeting, and it was deemed wise to postpone this. So, at the December 1st meeting, we approved warrants 1103, 1104, 1105, 1106, and 1107 in the amount of $279,480.47. And then we had another meeting on the 4th of January where we approved warrants 1108, 1110, 1111, 1112, 1113, 1114, 1115, and 1116 in the amount of $631,676.98. Also, warrants numbers 1117, 1120, 1121, 1122, 1123, 1124, 1125, and 1126 in the amount of $94,662.10. And I don't see that we did any payrolls at either one of those, but I could be mistaken.
The last one we did.
Right. We will at the Wednesday meeting.
All right. And our next meeting is this Wednesday, which is the 7th, at 8 o'clock at the James Kane room in the SU office. I hope it's not snowing.
Great. All right.
Do you remember anything else earth-shattering that we did at those meetings?
Basically, yeah, we've been pretty well involved with the budget. That was the primary topic at both of our last two meetings. That's the focus for yet another week and one day.
All right. Excellent. Okay. WSESU finance.
Okay, we met, and we do post minutes, but we rotate the minutes around, and it was my turn, and I drafted them, but I forgot to write down all the warrants and things, so they're not posted yet, but they have been drafted, and I'll review what we did. We did do warrants and payrolls. And you can find them if you go to the WSU and you go to the WSESU board, then the notices of meetings, and then to the right are where the minutes are. So we approved warrants and payrolls. Frank reviewed the independent auditor's report, and it was a clean report, which is good. Unqualified, is that what it's called? And since that meeting, we've heard that that's it. I mean, you've reviewed it, and that's good. We also started talking about the review process for the superintendent's contract. She has a 2-year contract, but traditionally we've looked at it in year 1 to add another year, and so we're looking at a process of how to do that. Thinking of bringing in the Vermont School Board Association for some assistance, and so we're moving forward on that. We approved 3 retirements in special ed staff, and then we spent a fair amount of time on defining roles and responsibilities, which we will present at the full WSESU meeting, which is this Thursday, February 8th in Putney. I want to say 6:30. I'm not sure if that's it or not.
Yeah.
I think it's 6:30. And so the 3 members, Ann and Ruth and me, so we'll all be there.
I expect so.
Okay. And anyone else, because at this meeting, we hope to, we'll present a draft of this new executive finance committee that we're talking about, and I was hoping to be able to distribute those tonight, but I will get those out to you before the meeting, because we're still sort of looking at it for typos and that sort of thing. What we based it on, Lyle went to some meeting of superintendents, Southern Vermont, and got some feedback there, and I was in touch with Mace, what's her first name? Nicole Mace at VSCB, Vermont School Board Association. And she said the bylaws of 2 executive committees in the state, and the one from the WCSU really looked what we were thinking of and matched up a lot with earlier minutes that I've talked with you. So it'll have membership being 1 person from each board, and included would be the WSESU chair, the vice chair, and the clerk, and they would serve as those positions, the executive committee, and then the other, because those would be from 3 boards, so from the remaining 2 or 3 boards, depending what year it is, if Vernon's in or not. Then, details about quorum and those sorts of things. But then we'd look at what the powers and duties are of the Executive Finance Committee. And it's basically what we've traditionally done, the finance in terms of reviewing budgets, and also in terms of superintendent review and hiring, which goes into the executive functions as well. And so it would be what's explicitly included there. So I can quickly run through it. Approve the draft of the WSESU budget, financial oversight, looking at the issues of ethics that may come up, looking at communications and engagement to keep all the local boards informed of things, handling general WSESU personnel issues brought by the superintendent, negotiate and renew the contract for superintendent, and confirm the hire of the central office administrators, being special ed, curriculum and assessment, and the business administrator. But we had a discussion, and we thought not to do what we do at this board, though, do what a lot of the other town boards do, which is not, explicitly, approve each of the new teacher hires. And so that was a decision that was made as a proposal, and then we can discuss that on Thursday if that makes sense. And then conduct evaluation of superintendent, and then and conduct searches for and recommend a candidate or candidates for superintendent in the future, whenever those openings come up, just to make things really clear. Hire consultants and hire attorneys when needed. And then also, and this was similar to the other bylaws we looked at, act on any other matter on behalf of the WSESU board in urgent or emergency situations when action is necessary for the best interest of the WSESU and a quorum of the full SU cannot be gathered for a meeting within reasonable time frame. And again, remember that on this executive committee would be the chair, the vice chair, and the clerk as well as others. So that'll be open, that's what our proposal will be, and that'll be open for discussion on Thursday to try to formalize what the SU has been doing. One thing that's off the table here that had been talked about before is dealing with the negotiations. There was a proposal to roll negotiations in this committee, and in discussions it was clear that that was covered by a different statute, and that the SU did not have the authority to make those sorts of decisions. Each of the member boards have to make decisions about how to structure negotiations. So that falls outside of the WSESU board. So there's a preview of us coming up on February 8th in Putney. And I think that is it. And I don't think we have another meeting scheduled at this point, though. There will be meetings. Or do we have another meeting scheduled? I don't know.
So we should do that at the next meeting.
Right. So, and this would then vote me off the chairpersonship of the finance committee. So, and at this point, Allison Laughlin, the chair of the SU, would be the chair of the finance committee, or the finance executive committee.
Thank you, Russ.
Yep.
Planning and policy.
Has not met.
Teacher curriculum.
Has not met.
BAMS committee.
BAMS committee had a pretty informative and meeting tonight. There were 7 individuals there, and basically the conversation was mostly around how the new program at BAMS, what the complexion of it will be, and specifically around the PEAK program and the STEP program. Obviously no conclusion was drawn, but it was an interesting conversation, which I hope that clarified some of the unknowns. So,
if I could just add a little bit, Flo was there, which was really helpful to hear her viewpoint and to bring that in. And similar to what Flo had said earlier, I think that we all agreed that there's a need, sort of a twofold need. One is for students at BAMS that need some extra reaching out to. That's a bad sentence, but that both those with behavioral issues and those that don't learn well in a traditional sort of way and appreciate experiential learning in other sorts of way to get those core materials. So the question is, how do we serve those two populations? And then also the segue into the high school. Those issues don't just disappear when you leave 8th grade, and so to expand to the high school. And in part, echoing on what Ricky was talking about the budget, is there are new positions within that panoply of those two goals of dealing with those students. And so what needs to be done in the future is to look at how we can best serve those two particular needs. And Lyle was at that meeting as well. She's at the Guilford meeting right now, but that she did see, whether we call it PEAK, whether we call it STEP, or whatever acronyms we use, that she believed that there should be at least one teacher, if I got that right, in the alternative ed sort of thing, sort of perhaps a peak-like position. And that's something that needs to be worked out so that that is a real need that people advocate for and recognize. And so that would be a goal to preserve, and then look at the other behavioral issues. And Keith talked a lot about behavioral issues and the need there. So there are these two different needs, middle school, high school. So these are decisions that need to be made as we start getting towards August 28th. Was that opening day next year? Whenever opening day is. And those are the decisions that have to be made. And it's a mix of hiring decisions, but it's a mix of, but it's also what the program should look like. And I appreciate it. We all appreciated Flo, you being there and having that input. And those meetings, the BAMS meetings, are posted. And I was happy to hear that it's posted on an internal faculty on the website.
The newsletter?
The newsletter, yeah.
I just put it in there for that time, but.
Yeah, so that, I'm hoping that when meetings are there, I mean, they're posted in the paper as well, but I would hope that those would continue to come out and hear that. And I mean, Sean and others spoke at the BAMS meeting. The board, we're not professionals in this field, and that's why we hire professionals to make those things. But we want to help facilitate and to bring some focus into what those decisions might be. So again, reiterating what Ricky said, is that we're looking for an increase in serving those students that would benefit from these programs, and then the details to be worked out and how to allocate that. So anyway, I thought it was a good meeting and helpful.
WRCC committee.
That's not bad.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion to approve consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Abstentions? No nays? Okay, great. So let's move to administrative reports, and why don't we start with the Career Center and work our way down.
Ricky? Good evening, everyone. So I will begin with a report from our forestry program. This past week, on the 31st, students attended the winter forestry competition located in Essex. They competed against 180 other participants in Vermont throughout the state. And those students that participated were Gabe Clark, Michaela LaFlamme, Gunnar Nielsen, Alec Pelton, Dan Petrie, Ben Stone, Ethan Bristol, Tyler Jobin, David Chapman, Jacob Lamorter, Logan Morton, Dylan Paquette, Anthony Williams, and staff Errol Nelson, Diane Nuzzo, and John Harrison, and also Maria Nichols and Bailey Johnson. And I'm pleased to announce that they did place third in the state against the other tech centers, which is a great achievement for our students. And those students that are on the winning team were Jacob Lamorter, Dylan Paquette, and Anthony Williams, and Dan Petrie. So if you see those individuals, give them a pat on the back and congratulations for a job well done. We're very proud of our students and our FFA organization that they belong to within their natural resources forestry programs. I want to thank the construction trades program and students Mitch Flood and Brendan Fisher with teacher John DiMatteo for building this great screen right here in front of us that the projector projects onto and with the new projector as well. We usually try to incorporate our trades and our students to create projects around the building. So you see those individuals, these kids, they utilize their skills that they've been learning in construction trades to serve the community, which is great to see. Coming up are electronics and photonics students, led by teacher David Houghton, will be bringing his students to Springfield Technical Community College on the 12th to see what types of electronic photonic programs they have available to them at the secondary level. It's a great hands-on program that kids will come back energized and fired up, no pun intended there, about what they offer. And hopefully some of the kids will choose to attend their programs when they graduate from their sending schools. We have, at our WRCC, began our outreach to our sending schools and our middle schools. And we've created a new roadshow that I spoke of a few weeks ago. And the roadshow this year consists of program students participating in creating a hands-on application within a 40-minute time period. And there's different programs at the Career Center that will be represented. We want to get the different programs out there to show kids, and it's a very interactive process. We have volunteers in the audience come up and utilize their skills and create a lot of excitement around the competition. Our first one debuted at BAMS. I want to thank Keith for allowing us to utilize our first show, and we presented it to BAMS and to other area middle schools, about 200 students, and then we took them on a tour of the Career Center and our programs we have to offer them. A lot of excitement, great feedback from the area principals, and so our upcoming road shows will be at Hinsdale this Wednesday in the library. It'll begin at 10:55. And like I said, it goes for about 40 to 45 minutes. The next one after that will be at Bellows Falls, and that will be Wednesday, February 14th at 1:55. And the following will be February 27th here at Brattleboro Union High School in the auditorium, and that'll begin at 1 o'clock. The following will be at Leland and Gray on March 9th, and we've invited them back to BAMS to present to them at 9 o'clock. And then the last one will be at Twin Valley on March 14th, beginning at 9 o'clock. Again, that'll be in BAMS as well, in the multi-purpose room. And I want to thank my student volunteer, the Master of Ceremonies with me, Ethan Sage. He is a junior that attends Brattleboro Union High School, and he is on stage with me talking about Career Center and his experiences and the programs that have changed his life in high school. And I want to commend Ethan for doing a job well done. And it's very hard for a student to get up in front of his peers to talk, and he had done a phenomenal job at BAMS in front of 200 plus students. So every time I ask him how's he doing before the show, he says, "I'm nervous as you can think about, Mr. Burnett." But I respond, "I am too, but we get through it." And we're doing it for the Career Center and the students and the programs. So my hope is with this new approach to outreach will generate more interest for the Career Center programs. It's been very successful in other centers. Stafford uses this approach and really sees an increase in enrollment. So if we can overcome some of the budget crises in the future, that'd be great, and allow kids and parents to understand why we've shifted to a new model for career pathways. And that segues into my next topic of I'm going to be hosting Amy Wyatt she is a facilitator with the Southern Regional Education Board. It's the organization, school improvement organization that we've been working with for the past 5 years here at the Career Center. And she's going to be here for 2 days, February 28th and March 1st, facilitating career pathway workshops with all of our area sending school counselors, as well as another day with administrators and board members. I invite all of you to come. The administration workshop will be March 1st, starting at 9 o'clock here in this room. And the counselor overview will be February 28th at 1 o'clock here in this room. And that's the regional RCDC meeting for career counselors and sending school counselors. So a lot of great work we're doing. She's also going to be working with 5 Career Center teachers to really hone in and create the career pathways for their program. And we're going to be sharing these program pathways with our area middle schools through PLP processes and any other avenue that we can generate interest with. So that's all I have for the Career Center.
Excellent.
Any questions?
Any questions, sir? Excellent. All right. BAMS. Hi, Ron.
Let's see, so I haven't reported out in a while because we've been busy with budget, but one event that happened in early January that I wanted to speak about, our student leadership led by Caitlin Campbell and Gabby Raccio went to Landmark College. Landmark has partnered with our SU to host student leadership events, and it was a really nice event on January 8th. Diana Wally, who's part-time for the SU, kind of puts it all together, and our students mixed with the other sending elementary schools and middle schools from the SU to rotate around different leadership topics, and they're facilitated by some teachers, and there was a group of high schoolers from the diversity class that were there. So it was a really nice event. And then there will be a follow-up. We do the 2-day thing in the summer, which some of you likely heard about. Recent staff event, Don Petrovsky and Jean Gilbert and others at the central office helped put together they started a couple years ago an annual, they call it Heart and Soul, and it's kind of the wellness committee for the SU for the staff, and there was well over 100 people there, I believe, and it was at the VFW this year, but the folks behind the scenes who put it all together really did a nice job, and it was a nice event. This Thursday, Junie Pereira, one of our teachers, has been working to try to form a parent, we call it a parent core team, so getting more parents involved at BAMS, and so there's a meeting at 6 o'clock on Thursday to continue to work to improve parent involvement at BAMS, and it's always a struggle to get parents to come for these kind of things, so we've hired Junie to help coordinate that and many other kind of parent connection events, things to involve parents. So you could spread the word if you know any BAMS parents. Flo's here. She and the rest of the staff and students went to Mount Snow last week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and had a great time, and that's been a nice partnership. And Flo's had a strong role in connecting our program to Mount Snow, and there's a little bit of skiing, but most of the time they're learning about the mountain and the operations up there and looking at different careers that can come from the ski industry. So they'll continue. I think it's 8 weeks, right? Yeah. So it's nice.
The Mount Snow is amazing with
Yeah.
us. I mean, they also have semi-private lessons. And, if we have 2 expert snowboarders, we get an instructor for 2 expert snowboarders. So the peak students have an amazing experience there. Yeah.
So that will continue this winter. A big thing that just happened behind the scenes, and we're hoping to get good results. Kate Burke, our 21C, she's our BEAMS coordinator, and Kate's presented to the board before, just finished the application for a new 5-year grant. It's a very competitive process. I can't remember how many schools are applying and how many will receive the grant, but it's competitive, and we've received it twice now, 2 5-year grants, so we're shooting for a third, and she's just worked so incredibly hard to finalize all that paperwork. It was due yesterday. She was early getting it in, I think Friday, and really proud of her, and if you see her, thank her for that, because incredible amount of work. And also the business office and kind of helping her finalize all the financial things. Some student events that have happened recently. Districts for music, Riley Goodmote, our music teacher, and I'll list the names really quickly of the students: Amar Vargas, Brianna Colburn, Aisha Pierce, Lauren Carpenter, Ben Bergstrom Harvey, and Violet LaCroix all went to Springfield High School this last weekend, Friday, Saturday, practiced and then performed for the public. A few other student events. We have Honor Roll Assembly on the 12th. Well, it's more than honors. We're recognizing kids in a variety of ways, but we'll also do Honor Roll Assembly on the 12th. And then that evening we do a Vernon Parent Night. So we're talking about these Vernon students. We go, the counselors, myself, assistant principal, we go and present to any current 6th grade families who want to learn more about BAMS. And we just present our basics and what we offer. And so we'll be doing that on the 12th. We have an assembly for Mana La Mancha, is that how you pronounce it? Yeah.
Yep.
So they'll perform for BAMS on the 14th in the afternoon, a little preview of that show. I don't know if you'll speak more about that or not, but that was it. Any questions?
May I just add one thing? I won't sleep tonight if I don't say, the Mount Snow connection is really Lauren Petrie. I mean, she predates me. She's been part of the, really working to help students make healthy choices and find things they're interested in. And she's an excellent skier, but that's not the connection. The connection really is Lauren and what her work with Mount Snow through Refuse to Abuse and a whole bunch of other things. So I would be sleepless if I took the credit for Lauren's role in that.
Well, you get plenty of credit too. High school.
Good evening. I am here for Seat Parent tonight. So our second semester is off and underway. It's been pretty smooth. We have a few things going on in the art and music departments. 27 of our students were recognized for achievement in this year's Scholastic Art Awards. So that was for both art and English. Some may be considered or will be considered for national recognition. We're just waiting to hear on that. The art department has been meeting with members of Marlborough College to coordinate opportunities for students in dual enrollment classes. And the sewing class was recognized in the Reformer for making a number of cloth bags that were donated to veterans. In music, we had 18 BUHS musicians who took part in the Connecticut Valley District Winter Music Festival, which took place in Springfield. I think that's where the BAMS kids were. 8 students sang in the chorus, and 10 of them played in the jazz band. The musical is Man of La Mancha this year, and we are wrapping up rehearsal. There are tickets on sale currently for shows which will be on February 15th, 16th, and 17th. The 15th is a Thursday, that's a 4 o'clock matinee, and Friday and Saturday the show is at 7 p.m. It's always a good show. I recommend checking it out. There will be previews for BAMS as well as high school students. And we just had a group of students from Costa Rica join us. So we had 19 Spanish students came and, oh, I'm sorry, just kidding. That was on January 19th. Spanish students and their families came and stayed with families here. There were 12 students and 4 teachers from Costa Rica. On the 25th, they the Costa Rican students cooked and served an authentic Costa Rican meal. And that was held in BAMS. They also learned how to dance, tried some authentic food, and participated in a bunch of other activities with their host families. The students from BUHS will travel to Costa Rica in April with Kurt Johnson from BAMS and Suzanne Grenoble in the high school. She's taken over the Costa Rica trip, even though she is a French teacher, so we thank her for that. Tomorrow is our 8th grade parent night. We will be hosting parents from all over the district who will be joining us here next year as freshmen. And that should be an interesting evening. I'm sure lots of questions and answers. And I would like to pass out the ELA newsletter from the Vermont Agency of Education, which features our very own Peter Canizero, the head of the English department. So he's answered some questions for the AOE. It's a nice little write-up on how the English department is handling proficiency.
Department handling what?
Proficiency.
Oh, proficiency.
Other than that, Frank, do you want to talk about our
Yeah.
situation from this morning?
Yeah, we had an incident in the building, unfortunate flooding. Roof drains appear to have possibly frozen in the ground, and when there was some melt associated with rain, likely last night, we came into the building this morning with a significant amount of the social studies wing and then in the floor below.
Yeah, it's the English hallway right down this side of the building, and then the social studies underneath. All of those classrooms were very wet.
Flooded. So Robert Clerk organized the Surf Pro folks to come in and zip the drywall border out and drill holes in to air it out, mitigate the damage. And they took out the water, and we'll probably be down one more day to make sure we avoid any sort of problems with moisture in the walls and so on. And expect to be back in business on Wednesday. And we do have roofers helping us understand the cause of this problem. It has not happened before in this way, so it's still a little bit of a mystery what caused it, but we'll be investigating.
We do have to note, Robert Clark and his staff today were amazing. They really jumped right on it, and all of the teachers who we had to scramble to find places for them to teach today were great. The kids were flexible, so it was a real community effort today. We were teachers everywhere, so.
Okay.
And it will be a claimable event as far as cost of this. We expect insurance to cover this.
Excellent. Yes.
Yeah, I just really enjoyed hearing about all the artistic endeavors of the high school students. And I might as well use this time to do my little AIM scholarship plug. If there are any students that are in this school that are interested in further education in any arts, make sure that they understand that the AIM scholarship is a wonderful scholarship that's available only to BUH students. It represents a pretty substantial amount of money, and anybody that wants to go into any arts and makes application, any of those individuals are eligible. So it would have to do with architecture, music, fine arts, ceramics, photography. Arts is a very broad term, and we're so lucky in this community to have such a meaningful and really quite financially substantial scholarship. So that's the plug I like to make every year, so this was a perfect time to put it in. So, thank you.
Great. All right. Central office.
I do have a few things on behalf of Lyle. Here we go. So Steve, on behalf of Steve, he's asked the board to approve our early release dates of May 9 and May 10 in the spring for testing. And he wants to be sure they can put that in a newsletter next week, so he was looking for approval today of that request, and it is something you've done in the past, so it's not new.
This is for the science testing, right?
This is for the SBAC, both the
Not
SBAC.
science.
Not science.
Not science, everything but science.
He does refer to the 11th grade taking a science assessment as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we would probably, the science testing has changed, so we would have to work that out. We wouldn't ask for a half day for that. We
Okay.
would do the May 9th and 10th have early release days so that the 9th graders can take their test. We would do it over 2 days. SBAC testing is moved from 11th grade to 9th grade.
Because we can't be consistent and actually give the data.
I just have, why do we have the early release days? I don't understand why.
To provide a quiet testing
So some
situation.
students stay, taking the test. The ones that aren't
Correct.
taking the test go home.
So it would be a half day for 10th through 12th graders. The 9th graders would stay here and take their exam. They would be provided with a lunch on both days, and then the testing would begin. And then when they're done, buses would run normally, so anybody who needs to take the bus 9 through 12 would be back here for the 3:30 dismissal.
And just the way Steve explained this, I remember him explaining this, I think last year, or the year before, the first time that this happened this way was because some of the classes are mixed grade classes. So you might have a class where half or 2/3 of the class is going out for testing and the rest of the class isn't, and they would be, and then this also gives the opportunity to have more than one teacher in a room with the students doing the testing, so if somebody needs help, there's plenty of staff to give the assistance.
Except they can't really give them much assistance.
Well, yeah, but what assistance they can give, there's more than one person
They got
available.
stopped us getting assistance.
Right,
Yeah.
or maybe that too. So is there a motion to approve half days for testing on May 9th and 10th?
I move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? Okay, good to go. Anything else?
Okay, second is a Act 250 permit. It's a pretty routine request, part of for Brattleboro Memorial High School, or I'm sorry, Brattleboro Memorial Hospital, almost the same acronym there. Act 250 Criterion 6, it's a request to approve the, I guess it's an impact statement acknowledging that the proposed construction of a new 27,000 square foot building, modify existing surgical facilities to meet current design standards, will not have a adverse effect on Brattleboro Union or Middle School. So Lyle and I both recommend that we approve this Act 250 request.
I'm familiar with that project, and it's a great investment, but it's not going to have any great impact on numbers of employees and so forth.
I
And therefore
certainly
number
don't
two.
think a new surgical suite is gonna have much impact on her.
Well, more people will survive now.
Oh,
There'll be more kids.
yeah, maybe.
So there's something. Okay. Is there a
I
motion?
move approval of the impact statement,
Act 250?
yeah.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? Okay.
Okay, a couple of more items. The next one is, this is just more of a FYI, there's a request from the Southeastern Vermont Superintendent Region, so the superintendents, which would include Wyndham Central, Wyndham Southwest, and they're recommending, that group is recommending Wyndham Southeast participate in a extension of the 7th and 8th grade school choice provision. So Lyle and I are not inclined to recommend that we extend this school choice law that's 9 through 12 to grades 7 and 8. A number of reasons, but the primary one would be, our region is subject to this Act 46 governance review. So our structure is subject to whatever the State Board of Ed decides. This, as you know, I think we will hear a preliminary basis in June. And so it doesn't make sense to us to try to reconfigure what has been in place for many, many years, 9 through 12 choice, and extend that to the 7th and 8th grade. As you heard earlier from our discussion, at this point, it seems to be very beneficial to surrounding schools, but not so much for BUHS. And then the other question in our minds is just the way in which the structure has changed, particularly in Wyndham Central, around their reorganization. They have been reorganized, and we would want to understand the implications of who has choice and who doesn't, because obviously we don't want to enter into an agreement with a town that does not have a designated high school and therefore is obliged to pay tuition. So that would be a town like Dover. So they are part of the Wyndham Central Supervisory Union. So that raises some questions about, okay, are we eliminating our opportunity to charge tuition for a significant number of students? So
That would eliminate
it would. So we're not inclined to recommend this, but we wanted you to be aware that it is something that was suggested by this group, and Lyle was part of the group, and she indicated that this is what we would present to you.
Frank, in the earlier discussion, we talked about 9 through 12. That was a state mandate,
That's a requirement, yeah.
and this is not.
This is not.
Do you think it'll ever, I don't think it'll ever become one?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of your decision.
So there's no action needed?
No action, just a point of information.
Okay.
Last thing is, we have a notification of a retirement from Linda Quay after 37 years of service to the Wyndham Regional Career Center, announcing a retirement as of June 2018. So it's a request to accept that announcement.
I move that we accept the retirement request of Linda Quay with regret. So thank you for her service.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? None.
That's it.
Good. For my report, I really had one thing, and then I'm going to tack something under new business real quick. And Mary, you did everything you needed to do during your report, yes?
Yep.
Okay,
I
with
got
that,
it.
okay, great. It's just, and earlier this evening at the beginning of the BAMS meeting, Lyle asked me to pass this along because it's now pretty much public knowledge. But for those of you that do not know, Steve Perrin had a medical situation last week, and he was air flighted to Dartmouth. He's home now, stable, had some surgery, things are better. He wants to come back. He was planning on coming to the 7th grade meeting, or the tomorrow night's meeting. Lyle pulled the boss card, and I completely supported her in that, and that Steve is going to be out on medical leave until after February vacation, and then only with approval of his physicians will he be returning after February vacation. I understand he's been texting and Facebooking and having a good time with his sense of humor, which is all a good sign in his health, I think. But he's home, stable, doing well, wants to come back, but that is not happening right now. And Lyle called me on Thursday morning. This happened on Wednesday night. And Thursday morning I got a call from Lyle, and she informed me. But at that point we didn't know a whole lot. But so, just so that you know, he's doing well. I'm sure him being out is going to swirl all kinds of rumors, so all kinds of information has been going out to the faculty and staff to clarify that, so hopefully that gets nipped in the bud in the community. But he's home, he's well, and he'll be back right after break. Great. All right, is there anything else for administrative reports? All right, and we don't have anything under unfinished business scheduled. Is there anything under unfinished business that I'm not aware of that didn't end up on the agenda? No, see none. Under new business, two things. One that's not on our agenda that I just want to bring up real quick, and Lyle mentioned it a number of meetings ago, about the suggestion that came from, I'm not sure who the suggestion came from, about those of us on the board having a WSESU email address that all of our school board related stuff will go to, so it's not going to our personal addresses, email addresses, for a variety of reasons. I personally think that that's a good idea. My suggestion is going to be until we wait till after the election in March and the reorganization, so those of us that, some people that may be leaving the board don't have to get a WSESU email address now and then turn around in March, somebody new gets one, right? Somebody new gets one. Does anybody have a thought about that or a major concern about doing that? Sean?
Well, excellent. Since I'm running unopposed again,
Yeah.
I would love if it was implemented more quickly. I mean, the sooner the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Right, but I think that there are some people who are currently on the board who are leaving the
Or
board.
it all has to be done at once?
Well, I don't think it has to be all done at once. I just think it'd be cleaner if it was all done at once, and we're talking basically a month to wait.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah, so I think that if nobody has any objections, I'm gonna pass on to Lyle to pass on to the tech folks to start getting that ball rolling, unless anybody has a major objection to that.
I think it's an excellent idea.
Yeah, I think
Not
it's
sure why wouldn't.
why it hasn't happened before. I don't know why either, but I do think it's a good idea, and I think that it'll make things a little bit easier for us. And I know that during the Act 46 process, there was a time when, for Freedom of Information Act, that there was people that had requested every single email from every single person on the Act 46 study committee. So I know I personally printed hundreds of pages of documentation for this person to have from my own email, so that was clear. So this will make things a little bit easier for all of us going forward.
Ricky?
Yes.
This is Ian Keel, camera operator, BCTV.
Yeah.
Is there a current format that teachers and administrators use that would the school board, just in preparation for the public, like it might be like first name?
I think right now it's first initial, last name at wsesu.edu.
Org.
Okay, org, sorry.
So presumably board members will.
It would be the same thing.
Unless there's.
Mine would be like rdavidson at wsesu.org, essentially.
The other thing,
And
yours is up and running from
and
Putney.
it is A. Beekman.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
The other thing I would highly recommend to anyone, if they're interested, I had the opportunity to videotape Jim Condos, who did a seminar at the Brattleboro Select Board. It was a transparency tour, and he covered both open meeting law and records. And I would highly recommend, that's a BCTV program, you could search for Condos, Secretary of State Jim Condos. It's very informative. But that's enough of my interruption.
Thank you. The other thing under new business that we had, it was related to the annual meeting, which is a week from tomorrow, which we talked about already. 7 o'clock, high school gym. We're going through all the things that we've already kind of squared away.
Next week, not tomorrow.
A week from tomorrow.
Okay.
Not tomorrow. Yes, a week from tomorrow, not tomorrow.
Ricky, could you say the date and time one more time?
Yes, it is February 13th at 7 o'clock in the high school gym. So, and we've already decided who is doing what warnings. So Barb, as always, will have nice little cards for us all spelled out with exactly what we have to say. So that'll be very clear and taken care of. Because as always, Barb takes care of us in all kinds of ways that we can't even imagine. So that's all taken care of. Is there anything else, questions, concerns related to the annual meeting next week? No? Seeing none? And I just, in relation to that, and Sean mentioned that he's running unopposed from Guilford. But the makeup of this board will change after the March election because some people are choosing not to run again. And from the Brattleboro folks, because it's Katie and myself that are running, there's actually a third person running. So there's 3 people running for 2 seats, which hasn't happened in a really long time, so we will all see what happens when that happens. So, we'll see what things look like after March, after the town meeting day. So, thank you all. Okay. Anything else?
If there's no more business to conduct, I move we adjourn.
I second it.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.